Right, let's see how we get on. That's not going well doing with because I can't seem to move my slides on. Here we go. Right. For me, there's sort of three big aims for today's sort of session. The first one, and the most important one, and I think if we tick this off, then we've done a good job. And I say we because I'm obviously here speaking to you, but just because I'm delivering information doesn't mean that you're learning. So part of what I've got to do is be able to challenge you, maybe put you in some uncomfy situations to get you thinking about things, because then that's where you're going to see where the gaps perhaps in your knowledge lie. And then I can try and maybe fill those gaps with the information that I present. So it's a collaboration here. It's not me just speaking at you. It's hopefully you engaging to sort of learn a couple of things about yourself. But absolutely at the end of this sort of webinar, I hope that each and every single one of you are a more confident coach, and I've taken away a lot of the scariness or unknown around, youth strength and conditioning. Okay, so if we do that, we've done a good job. And then the two sort of strength and conditioning specific aims we've got is to improve understanding of your role as a judo coach in the physical development of a player. Okay, from a strength perspective and from a fitness perspective. As a judo coach, you have got to do everything. You have so many priorities that you're trying to get through. You've got the technical side of their development, the tactical side of it. You've got the time management side of it, because a lot of them are still at school or they're in further education. You've got all these competing priorities. So what I want to do is give you really good clarity on two elements. One is strength training, and then one is fitness training, so that you almost don't need to think as much about that side of things, because, okay, here's some stuff I can use. I know that's been tested. It's stood the test of time. It's not changing anytime soon. So I can put this into my program and start running with it from tomorrow. Okay. Before we begin, just a little bit of context as to you understanding the way my mind thinks about performance, or just how it thinks about training. I think we all agree there's so many different ways of doing things, and just because I'm here in front of you saying this is the way that I do it doesn't mean that somebody else's approach is worse, doesn't mean that it's better, just perhaps different. But I want you to be really clear on this is the performance process that I go through when I think about what we should be doing when we're training. Okay, so the first question always should be asking ourselves is, what is my intended outcome or goal? Okay, so if it's around, I want to be really clear, I want the athlete to be able to throw with this technique versus a right-hander. So that might be a goal, or I want them to be able to score the nail as a transition with this technique. So that's obviously, it's not a complicated thing. Where the next level or the next layer of thinking comes in is, what are the things that limit that outcome or block that outcome from being achieved? Because otherwise we'd have been able to achieve it right now. And for the purposes of this presentation, put on your physical strength conditioning cap. So let's not think about it so much from a technical tactical point of view, because that's the bit you guys are experts in. Although you should be going through this process yourself. But if we kind of put on our strength and conditioning hats and go, okay, what would be the physical things that are blocking me achieving that goal? So if it's throwing for, Ippon with an Uchimata, what would be the physical things that would block me at the moment being able to achieve that goal? So it might be balance on your single leg, or it might be flexibility. The next layer we should be thinking about is, how can we evaluate or measure these rate limiters? Okay, because if we then identify there are important things that are blocking us getting to our goal, I need to be able to put in some way of measuring the current level of where it is, so that I can see if my training program has been effective or not effective. Okay, and like, hand on heart, I'm ineffective a lot of the time because training people is really complex. But the fact that I measure and evaluate it allows me then to say, right, I've not been effective there. I need to have a different strategy. Okay, and that would come into the sort of fourth level, which is identifying training tools that are going to target these physical rate limiters. And that's the bit that we're going to go through today. But that's really important to capture, and just to get yourself thinking a little bit the way that I think around, right? Need to be really clear on the goal, need to identify what are the things that are blocking me achieving that goal from a physical point of view. How can we evaluate the current level of those things? And then what are the training tools that are my options to improve them? Okay. So first of all, setting a little bit of the scene. Where you guys are as coaches with youth and development athletes, your job is to provide a really good base and introduction for the athletes to get them to a point where when they go to a national program or they transfer to a high performance center somewhere, that they've got a good base of skills so that they can be accelerated through quicker when they get into into a performance center. Okay, again, you've got so many conflicting priorities that you're trying to do yourself. That's one of the reasons that performance centers have so many staff, so that they can share the burden of this person with expertise is going to look after the medical side of things. This person with expertise is going to look after the psychological side of things, and so on. But the end point that we're trying to get people to, from a strength and power point of view within judo, is basically this. This has been captured off. I think there's about 600 different athletes I've got data on now. So, and you can see where they lie in respect of strength standards. So if we just look at the red dotted box, we can see for the weight categories roughly where strength levels get to. So for example, if we look at the back squat there, we can see that a 52 kilo elite female should be able to do a full squat, back squat with around about 90 kilograms. Okay. Or if we look at an elite male 60 kilo player, we'd be looking at them being able to full back squat around about 110 kilograms. Okay. So fairly heavy. Okay. And the reason these exercises have been selected is because they're quite easy to standardize. So it's easy to get lots of data across different countries. But this is the end point of what an athlete will be trying to achieve. But this is not your job to get them to achieve it. Your job is to lay some other foundation things that's going to make it easier for when an athlete transfers to a high performance center, that we can accelerate them towards this. Okay. Just like a couple of little bits of examples so that we can see this, because sometimes it's quite difficult to visualize it if you don't see in front of you. So here is actually from today, current Olympic bronze medalist in 70 kilos. So I think this is her squatting 110 kilo, I think. And I think she bangs out for about 5 or 6 repetitions. Okay, so 70 kilos, she's squatting 110 kilograms there for sort of 5 repetitions. And here we've got double Olympic champion at 73 kilos. I think it's 180 or 190 kilo on the bar. So you can see full depth there. Yeah, with almost or over doubled his body weight. Okay, so this is what we're looking at. It's not just these numbers that this is, this guy's saying this to me. Here is the actual evidence of it. Okay. Same for some of the other lifts. I think this is 120 kilograms for an Olympic clean there. Here's an athlete who'll be competing later today. I think this is 87.5 kilos. So 78 kilo fighter lifting well above sort of 1.25 times body weight. And first Canadian female Olympic medalist in judo, I think. So, and this here, I think is actually 60 kilograms. I think there's 2 5s on there. So fights 57 kilos and is lifting well over body weight there. There we go. Just sort of one other bit, just looking at sort of upper body strength. Again, I think we have here 90 kilograms on the bar. So for a 70 kilo female, lifting 90 kilos, well above body weight. And I'm not sure if you got a medal today, but that's 60 kilograms. So you're looking at well over 2/3 of his body weight strapped to him there, and being able to do a pull-up with that. So this is the end point that a lot of the time we're trying to get to. This is what they'll be doing to prepare for the Olympic Games. It's not your job as coaches on the pathway to get them there. It's to put in place fundamental skills and movements to be able to get them to accelerate their development when they move to a performance center. Okay. So really quickly, you can put your answers in the chat box if you feel comfy, but if not, write them down so that you can start thinking about this for yourself. So in 60 seconds, list as many factors or rate limiters as you can, which you think would limit high quality fundamental movements. So if we think about fundamental movements are things that we've just seen in the videos, but also think about your judo fundamental movements. So, your basic techniques that you're going to do in judo, list as many factors as you can that would limit your ability to be able to do good quality movements. Okay, off we go. And I shall see if I can bring up my chat box. Okay, so we've got some coming in. We've got flexibility, yeah. We've got foot speed. Coordination, good one. Yeah, balance. Yeah, definitely the cognitive side of things. Oh, we don't know what's going on here. Yeah, injuries. Dynamic grip strength. Right, another 30 seconds. Rotation, anti-rotation movements. Yeah, really good one. Okay, right. Let's call it there. So look, really good start there. Oh, we've got one more coming in. Speed and flexibility. Absolutely. So look, already your knowledge around what are the things that are going to be limiting athletes being able to get better at these good quality movements is already really high. So look, good job with that. I'm going to go through a couple of other rate limiters and how they fit together to maybe think about things a slightly different way. So if we have a clear criteria of what fundamental movements are, it allows us to break it down a little bit clearer so that we can think a little bit more in depth. So as I said, the fundamental judo techniques such as throwing and groundwork, that's what we're going to define as fundamentals. They are limited by your basic human movements. Okay, so if we look at movements such as being able to pull with your arms, or being able to push with your arms, being able to squat and bend with the knees, being able to hinge at the hip for things like Uchimata. So if we imagine a big circle or a Venn diagram of all basic human movements, judo movements have to be a subcomponent of that. So they must have to fit into a component of a larger human movement. Okay. Human movements, as somebody said it really well, are limited by coordination. Now, coordination is a little bit of it's a bit of an abstract word people talk about, but they don't really know what it means. In the most simple term, it's your muscles are going to be the thing that's going to move your body. And what coordination is the signals between the muscles to say, this one should switch on at this time and how much it should switch on. This one should switch off at this time and how much it should switch off, so that you end up with a really smooth and fluid movement. Okay, so when we think about coordination, really talk about the muscle itself talking to its own self to say, oh, I need to switch on this much and I need to switch on at this time, and it's communication between other muscles. So that's what we mean by coordination. And coordination will be limited by the individual characteristics of the muscle. So if we think some muscles can contract really quickly and they're explosive, and then some muscles are built for endurance, so they'll contract much slower. Okay, so if we think the specific characteristics of that muscle is going to determine the coordination, our coordination is going to determine how good our basic human movements are, and how good our basic human movements are going to determine how good or the potential of our judo movements. Okay. This is some fairly new science, and it doesn't really change what we do, but it's an important thing for us to start thinking about, is that your muscles will give feedback to your brain. They will tell your brain what you're capable of. So ultimately, if you can improve your muscle characteristics, your brain will then realize, oh, these muscles are strong, or these muscles can contract quickly, and then you can get access and be able to move explosively, or move with better coordination, or be fluid and be less jerky. But it's ultimately the brain that's going to control how we move. And then because we're on planet Earth, it's the Newtonian principles of motion that are going to determine ultimately how we move. We're going to be moving against gravity. Okay, so this is our hierarchy that we go through. So when we think about fundamentals, it's not just a case of going, oh, it's just these judo movements. We understand that, oh, judo movements are a subcomponent of basic human movement. Well, basic human movement is rate limited by coordination, which is limited by muscle characteristics, which will ultimately be limited by the brain. And then that's overall governed by Newtonian principles of motion. So it's a bit more complicated than we think. Fortunately, we can kind of distill down this sort of complex world of, okay, there's all these different layers into about 11 simple movements that if we execute them well, they'll give us a really good base of fundamental movements from how we can go to make our judo specific movements a little bit better. In some fairly new research that actually comes from people that have been paralyzed, there's a concept called cortical spinal excitability. Sounds really complicated, but in its essence, this is what it is. When you go through a movement, let's just take a squatting movement. Your brain is going to get feedback from your muscles, from your joints, and all the other tissues about what your joint looks like when it moves through that movement pattern. So if I move through a squatting pattern, my hips, my knees, my ankles are giving feedback to my brain. My brain then is building a picture or a map of what my body looks like, what it's capable of. So if we think, okay, if we can give ourselves lots of different inputs, we can go almost have this mindset of being able to give the brain as many different pictures from variations of different types of movements as possible. I'm going to have a really detailed map. The more detailed map I have of what my body can do, when I come to do my judo specific movements, my brain has a much better picture of, oh, my body is capable of doing these things. If we went the other way and we just did judo movements, the map is much more narrow. We're not able to see the total lay of the land or what the body's properly capable of. We can only see a little bit because we're limited, because judo movements can only show you what judo movements do. By nature, they can't expose you to more movements than judo has, because that's the movements that they've got. So although these movements might look nothing like anything you do in judo, what they do is they help build this picture and build this map within your brain of, okay, this is how my body moves. Okay. And within each of those movements, so we've got the 11 movements, we really have sort of 3 basic planes of movements. We have the up and down plane, which is also actually the same as the forward and back plane. There's some other stuff going on there, but essentially it's kind of the same. We have the side to side plane, and then we have the rotational plane. Okay, so there's our 3 planes of movement. So for all of the movements that we've shown, we can do them straight up and down or forward and back. We can do them side to side, or we can influence something so that side to side is a little bit more challenging, and same with rotationally. Okay. Right, back to a little bit of quick thinking and putting it back in your world and in the scenarios that you have to deal with every single time that you're coaching. You have an athlete who is growing a lot. The rate at which they're getting taller is or bigger is really quick. Just in 60 seconds, really quickly, list some methods or tools or tweaks, whatever you want to call them, that you would currently use to challenge their judo technical skills. So they're growing. What tools do you currently use to help make sure that you're challenging their judo technical skills? Okay, so I hope I'm making myself clear with that. Just throwing out there, I might want to challenge the speed at which they do something. So there's sort of an example. Okay, we'll go 60 seconds. If you're comfy, fire some stuff in the box and we'll see what we get. Yeah, filming them definitely. Foot sweep drills. Uchikomi. So if you carry on, keep putting things in the box, if we think, okay, Uchikomi, how do I tweak my Uchikomi to challenge their judo technical skills? So what do I do to the Uchikomi to make it a little bit more challenging? Or if I'm doing movement games, what is it that I do, or how do I vary? Switch sides, yeah. Yeah, so Uchikomi on the move. Yeah, Uchikomi moving in different directions. Okay, we've got 20 seconds left. If anyone's got to call it different directions, yes, so we've got different directions. Yeah, gripping practice, yeah, because obviously they're growing, absolutely. Throws and counter throws. Perfect, right. Let's call it there. So yeah, again, people are kind of getting the idea, right? They're growing, I need to challenge them. If we go back to the process at the beginning that I sort of spoke through of identifying what the rate limiters are, if we get ourselves in the mind of, okay, well, when they're growing then, what is the rate limit that I'm really trying to target? Okay, they're getting taller, but so what? What's actually changing in their body? So what is changing in the body? Fundamentally, the rate at which their bones are growing is quicker than the rate at which their muscles are growing or their other tissues are growing. This is something that you are dealing with the whole time with the population, with the athletes that you're working with. And if you remember earlier, I said it's the muscles and those tissues that are giving your brain feedback. So now the bone is grown, it's not giving your body feedback around how you're moving. It's the muscles, and of course they're changing the whole time. They're maybe not growing as quick as the bone, but they are growing a little bit. So we've got to think, right, how is it that I get these muscles and these other tissues to give feedback to my brain to help update this map, because the map's changing the whole time. Here's some of the ways that I would think about trying to challenge movement, as the athlete's growing. So we said it, the plane of movement or the direction of movement. We don't just want to do the things the same direction the whole time. We want to challenge that. So we want to do things to the right and things to the left. Not because they're maybe ever going to do that technique to the left. That's not what it's about. It's about updating this picture of, oh, this is what my body looks like when I move when I move to the left or when I move to the right. So it's about updating the pictures. I want to challenge the speed of the movement, because as we said, the individual characteristics of the muscles are going to give feedback to my brain. So if I can speed some things up, or maybe I want to slow some things down, that's going to build a little bit of a different picture. Because obviously, think if you jog and then you sprint, you actually move differently. So each of those builds a unique picture that's going to give my brain feedback. Oh, that's what I look like today. And then if I grow in a week and I'm doing the same things, I can update those pictures. The range of movements. Okay, so if we think about perhaps you're getting people to do a standing Ippon Seoinage, you might get them to drop, in sort of a quarter squat position, maybe a half squat position, maybe a full squat position. Okay, so that range of movement that you're making them do things over, you want to vary that to again draw different pictures for the brain. Sequences of movements. Okay, so rather than just doing the same sequences of movements, we maybe want to flip them and change them around, because the way that we transition between different movements is going to change. Okay, and then finally, we want to do some things fresh, but we also want to do some things fatigued, because again, when we're fatigued, we'll move a little bit differently. And if we can move a little bit differently, again, it's going to update the brain. This might sound, or I hope it doesn't sound massively complicated or scary to people. It's doing what you're already doing, but just subtly varying it a tiny little bit. So let's do this. Let's do these Uchikomi super slow. All right, let's do them super quick now. Or let's do one Seoinage where we do a quarter squat, and on the second rep it's a half squat, and the next one it's a full squat. Or let's challenge the sequence of that on the next set of drills or next week. Let's do, bottom, middle, up. Or maybe let's go middle, top, bottom. So you can change the sequence of these the whole time. Okay, so it's what you're already doing, just a tiny little subtle variation on that. Okay, I'll show a couple of examples of that from the movement menu. So as I said earlier, there's the menu. One of them is jumping and landing. So if we think about, okay, how could we subtly vary that? So there's a jump in a forward direction. Okay, how can I cause a really subtle variation of that movement? Well, rather than jumping forward, I could just jump straight up and down. Okay, it's building a slightly different picture for the brain. Right, rather than jumping straight up and down, I can jump side to side. Okay, so there's some variations from the movement menu, from jumping and landing. There's 3 different really subtle variations that we can do. If we carry on with our movement menu and we look at squatting, for example, here's a really simple variation of a squat that we can all do. We're going through full range of movement. Off the movement menu as well. Here is a lunge variation. Again, so if you look, we're taking the knee through a slightly different range of movement. It's not going the full range compared to when we're squatting. It's just that subtle variation. And then movement, we're holding the plate across our chest. We could easily vary this by holding the plate in one hand. The other hand, we could have a bigger bend in the knee. That would change the range of movement. We could do it even slower. We could do it even quicker. Okay. If we look at some upper body pushing movements, we don't just have our standard push-up, but we can go from side to side. Okay, really subtle variations there. What this is doing is it's just building a slightly different picture for my brain of what my shoulder looks like because I'm moving side to side. We have some pulling movements. I could speed this up. I could slow this down. I could only go halfway down, halfway up. Okay, we get the idea, or I'm hoping we get the idea. It's stuff you're probably already doing, but just really subtle variations of it. And then just finally, if you think about the sequence of things or the linking of things together, here we have a squat and here we have a press. So we've linked them together, and we've also challenged not just the sequence of movements, but the fact that we're holding something in one hand and not the other hand is going to put a bit of a side to side load on the body as well. So I'm not just moving up and down in this not just moving up and down, I'm also putting a load side to side. And we can do the same thing for some other movements. So we can link together here a hinge and an upper body pull. Again, we have a load only on one side. So it's not just sequence of movements, it's also putting together that change in directional loading, so side to side loading. Right, most importantly, let's remove some of the ambiguity. How do you do this stuff in your environment? So we've got the 11 movements, we've got the crawling, we've got the jumping and landing. This stuff, you'll get the slides so that you can go through them. But what's important is these things, as we said, are what your judo-specific movements are built upon these fundamental movements. The bigger the amount of fundamental movements you have access to, the player has access to, the better the picture they're going to have of what they look like, particularly as they're growing. They're growing the whole time. You're working with them. They've not stopped growing. They're growing every day. It might be subtle, might be small amounts, but the picture of what their body looks like is totally different week after week after week. So we need to update this picture every single session. Now, depending where you are, the type of dojo you have, so many other factors, the length of your session is going to change. But what we found has worked really well, and this isn't just in judo, this is with a lot of the other sports that I work with, is that 10-minute window of physical development should be included in every session. It's so important because it's going to make you better at your sport. It's not thinking about getting them stronger or more explosive right now. It's about allowing them to be able to get their judo techniques better, and they'll be able to get them better if they have a better awareness of what their body looks like. Okay, so we're going to devote 10-minute window to physical development every single session. We're going to choose 5 of the fundamental movements because that's going to give us a lot of practice time off those fundamental movements. If we try and include all 11, probably only going to get a couple of times through on each of them. If we choose 5 of them, we can get in a good amount of the movements. Where you do it in your session, that's your artistic license as a coach. Maybe you want to put them in warm-ups, maybe you want to put them in cool-downs, maybe you want to put them in session breakouts. That's totally up to you. You can change it. Variation is key. You want to be creative with it. Okay, so I hope this stuff, like, it makes sense and it's not too complicated, but will make them better at their judo techniques. Now, part of the sort of mysterious world of S&C is we like playing around with different combinations of how you structure the exercises and how many you do. But really, I've provided you with 4 simple examples here. Now, the reason I've put low repetitions is because we want each repetition to be really good movement quality. And because we're growing, or because the athlete's growing, their quality of movement is going to go down if they start trying to do higher repetitions. And then we're just going to be practicing bad habits. So within these sort of 10-minute windows of physical development, we want to be keeping the repetitions fairly low, under 10. And some of the schemes we've got there are 10 repetitions of each exercise, 5 rounds, okay, or 5 repetitions of each exercise, perhaps going really slow, perhaps going really fast, whatever you can do to just subtly vary the pictures for the brain. Or we can perhaps start at 10 and work our way down, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or we can do the opposite. But those are 4 really simple repetition schemes that you could just plug and play. I'm going to do my 10-minute window right at the start of the session. I've picked 5 of the movements. I've done a jump, a squat, a hip hinge, a upper body push and upper body pull. And I'm going to do 10 repetitions, 5 rounds. Okay. What this might look like when you design your session plan, you don't need to focus on the whole thing, but just you look at the blue box where I've sort of I've highlighted. This is a perfect place to put in the start of your session. Okay, so you would do a 5-minute general mobility warm-up or whatever you do, a game, whatever you would usually do at the start of a session. But then you would go into this physical development window. By making sure that you put it at the beginning of the session, which would be my preference, that means you definitely will do it. And it means that the athletes you'll get a chance to see how those athletes are moving at the start of the session at a consistent time, every time. And that for you is a really useful sort of piece of information as a coach, because then you can see that athlete A might be changing the way that they're moving a little bit. You understand they're going through a little bit of a growth spurt. So then that might give you some information to perhaps change or scale back some of the more complex things that you were planning to do in the session, because they're looking really jerky, they're not looking smooth, their coordination is gone. Yet I've given their brain this sort of update of what we look like by going through these moves at the start of the session. But I just know that if I go and do the judo techniques that I had planned, it's perhaps too risky today. Likewise, somebody else might have been really wobbly or really jerky for a couple of months because they've been going through this growing phase. And now when you put in this physical development window at the start of the session, you can see, oh, they're really consistent. They're moving really well now. Do you know what? I'm actually going to accelerate how complex I was going to make their judo task, because I can see that they've actually come through part of their growth phase just now. So their movements are fairly steady. Okay, but this is just a bit of an example. You don't have to copy this, but it's just sometimes easier for them to visualize, okay, how does this physical development window work? And you can just put it in there. So we'll open up a couple of questions now. So hopefully James has got them. So we'll maybe go 5 minutes for a quick bit of questions just on the sort of strength training, some strength training that we've covered. But I hope I've made it pretty clear that, you know, your role is to develop good movement patterns. It's not to refine them. It's not to get people super strong. That's when they transition to a senior high performance environment. Giving 10 minutes at sort of possibly at the start, but at least 10 minutes window in every single session means that you're giving these development athletes these updated pictures of what their bodies look like, and because you're updating these pictures, it means that they're going to be able to retain and improve their judo skill. In the 10-minute window, simple, just five of the fundamental movements, but make sure that they're in every session. Okay. Use the same themes of movement, but subtly varied. Make sure you do that in your judo techniques as well. So speeding them up, slowing them down, changing the range of movements, changing direction. And just make sure that you're not doing wildly high repetitions so that the skill level goes down, because then all you're doing is ingraining a bad picture of what your body looks like to your brain. You know, if we try and practice with the best technique possible, our bodies are more likely to try and find those positions when we're a bit tired or when we're doing randori. So make sure that if we can try and get good rehearsal on those skills, our body's more likely to try and find those positions. Okay. Jig, have you got any, or James, have you got any questions that have popped up in the chat box from people that we maybe want to speak about for 5 minutes?
There's none in there at the moment, but if I just switch to the gallery view, or maybe not. Do you have any more slides to go, Alan?
I do. I will.
Yeah, because I can't see the participants' video, and I don't know if they've raised their hand or not.
Well, if not, look, I'll move on just now. And if we have got questions, people just log them and we'll go through them at the end. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Right, so we've covered a little bit of strength training. Let's go through really quickly some concepts of fitness training for development judo players. So not for the senior judo player, but for the development judo players. From my perspective, and you know, I've chatted to a lot of different coaches about this, and different people have different ideas of why we're doing fitness training, but most of the time, this is where we end up getting back to. The aim of fitness training is to increase the potential for the athlete to do more high quality judo training at intensities close to and above competition. Okay, so you want to be trying to get as much quality training at close to and above competition levels. Because if we can go above competition levels, it means that when we have to come back down to the competition level, we've got some sort of reserve capacity. So that's the first aim. And then the second aim would be to improve our ability to repeat technical things that are going to help us win the contest. Okay, so that means that whatever conditioning that we design, we should be thinking about, right, I'm designing this to allow me to repeat technical things at high quality and intensity above that of the people I'm competing against. Okay. Right, a quick bit to sort of test your knowledge. So let's get some stuff in the chat box. In 60 seconds, now that you know, or sort of the agreed aim of most of the fitness sessions for judo athletes, think about the physical things. So put your physical hat on, or your S&C coach hat on. As many of the rate limiters or factors that you can think about that's going to limit somebody's fitness. Okay, so that when you design a fitness session, those are the things that you're trying to target. So remember, if the outcome's to try to get training above competition intensity, and the other outcome is that I'm trying to repeat the technical things at competition intensity or above, what are the physical things in my body that are going to limit me being able to do that? Okay, so let's go 60 seconds. Let's see what we can come up with. So yeah, endurance. So that's a good start. Let's boil up stamina. Okay. Think about, okay, well, what would limit stamina? What would limit endurance? Oxygen transport. Absolutely spot on. Okay. So if we take that oxygen transport one, think about, okay, well, what specifically limits my body's ability to transport oxygen around my body? Muscle composition, absolutely. If we've got too many fast twitch fibers, we're not going to have enough endurance. If we've got too much slow twitch fibers, we're not going to have enough power. Lung capacity, absolutely. The more oxygen we can breathe in, the more we're going to be able to transport around our body. Right, so we've got a good list of things there. Right, so we're thinking now around those. Yeah, VO2 max. So we're thinking now along what are those rate limiters that we're going to be able to try, that we're going to try to target. Okay. So if we start looking at, okay, where is it that we're trying to get the athletes to again? What is the level that we're trying to get them to? These times are measured using a 2,000 meter indoor rowing erg. It's on the Concept 2. It's a piece of equipment that most performance facilities have now. It's fairly standard across the world, and it's a good assessment because it takes in it challenges the legs, the trunk, and the arms, which are obviously all important things for judo. It also takes away some of the other physical qualities that maybe aren't important for judo, but they would give people a really good test result. So for example, if we look at running as a skill will massively impact your running performance. Also, if you look at the springiness of you, so how good your sort of elastic system is at being able to retain energy while you're running, all these things are really going to skew your actual sort of aerobic capacity. So that's one of the reasons that we use the rowing test. But you can see if you look at, for example, a 57 kilo female, you're looking at their sort of elite judo benchmark being about 8 minutes, or a VO2 max of about 61, 62. Okay, if we look at a male 73 player, we're looking at the benchmark being about sort of 7 minutes 05, or a VO2 max about 60. Okay, so this is where we're trying to get people to. We think, well, why is this important? If we just look at the 60 kilo weight category from the Olympics a couple of days ago, almost all of the later stage matches have gone into golden score. So having a really good aerobic system is what's going to allow us to be able to perform in these medal rounds. We're looking at, and bear in mind, these durations are the clock durations from the starting of the match. The absolute durations are even longer. So that 11-minute contest there in the semi-final, I haven't gone through, but I will do at some point. I reckon that match will probably be 16 or 17 minutes long. So having a really good aerobic system is absolutely key. Okay. Now, I think our job as S&C coaches is to complement the stuff you do. And what judo coaches are really good at doing is getting high intensity out of people. Okay. This is the sort of work that you'll probably all be really familiar with, and it's what the top end judo players are going to be doing. As you can see, it's intervals, it's maximum intensity, it's a mixture of exercises to get good endurance and a range of muscles in the body, and just some typical sort of schemes that's used in judo a lot is 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, or 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. Okay, this is stuff that you guys are absolute experts in. It's your bread and butter that you do. Okay, however, if we think back to about 2 minutes ago and we were going, what are some of the rate limiters? This type of conditioning will only target certain types of rate limiters. It won't target all of them. Okay, so if we think about, right, what are most of the common rate limiters? We came up with a lot of these ourselves, or rather you did a few minutes ago. So we can kind of break down aerobic adaptations into two main categories. We have oxygen transport, so getting the oxygen in the blood out to your muscles, and then how the muscles utilize the oxygen. Okay, so we have getting it there and then what we do when we use it. Now, that really high intensity conditioning that you've seen sort of in the video there, and the stuff that we like to do as judo coaches, is really good at the oxygen utilization part. It does that bit extremely well. What it doesn't do so well is the transport bit, okay? And as we've seen, our matches are going to be, if we get into the medal rounds, they're going to be sort of 7, 8, 9 minutes plus. So making sure we actually get oxygen there in the first place becomes a massive rate limiter for us. Excuse me, so that's what we're going to focus on now. So when we want to design sessions to improve this sort of slightly longer duration fitness, we want to make sure that the training session that we do isn't this short, high intensity, you know, all out max effort stuff. It's actually slightly longer and less intense. Okay, so we're looking at probably 30 to 60 minutes in duration. We want it to be continuous work, because if we're looking at the transport system, we want the blood to be moving through the heart for a long period of time, which is going to stretch the heart out, and it's going to improve the width of the valves in the heart, and that's going to allow us to get more blood through per beat. So we want to get that stretch for a long period of time, and if we give rests, then the blood will stop flowing through the heart at the same rate, and then the heart will shrink. So we want this continuous work. We want mostly, as funny as it sounds, easy and moderate intensity work with maybe a little, I call them spices of higher intensity. So you want to be doing maybe 3 or 4 minutes of just easy work, and then maybe just a little 10-minute burst of intensity. But for the most part, it should be easy work. And then because we're looking at trying to get these sort of central changes, so changes in the heart are the main changes that we're trying to get to help deliver the oxygen. We want to really stick with the same exercise for the whole 30 or 60 minutes, because every time we go to change exercise, we'll probably be letting our heart rate drop off a little bit. So kind of if we can keep that same mode of exercise, that's going to be advantageous. And we want to be doing this once or twice a week. Okay. Now, just like I've done before, where I've given sort of four schemes of how to design this sort of movement training, here is 4 really simple aerobic capacity sessions that you can just take away and plug and play with athletes that you're currently working with. So for the first one, where it's going to be three minutes at sort of 60 or 70%, followed by 1 minute, a little spice, slightly higher. And then as we just go to session B, it just comes out 2 minutes easy, 1 minute of moderate. So slightly more work in the moderate zone there, because we're doing a smaller amount of easy work. And then session C, example session C, it's a progression from there, and then example D as well. Okay. Now, if we just take 2 of those examples, this is what they could like. Again, this is giving some ideas. This is what it could look like. You could do this out running. You could give this to your development athlete, just out running once or twice a week. Just 2-minute easy jog, 1 minute moderate running, then 1 minute hard running, and just repeat that 8 rounds. It would take 32 minutes. But you can also do it using judo, and this is what I think is really beneficial for those development athletes, because you can now get more volume of judo, and then you can also get those adaptations at the same time. So as an example, if you were to do a minute easy, a minute moderate, a minute hard, you could do that as 1 minute of newaza, and you're just asking them to go through their techniques, or you could do it as randori if you want, but it should be a minute easy. You could then do a minute of tachiwaza, but only with ashiwaza. So you wouldn't be being as explosive or with big power movements, so that would limit it to moderate. And then you might do 1 minute hard. Okay, that would be your spice of high intensity. Okay, but thinking about trying to apply these types of sessions in judo is a way of getting extra volume, but getting adaptations or targeting those rate limiters we usually wouldn't get doing our typical judo conditioning. So let's try and get a session that we can go away, that we can play around with, and that we can actually do with our athletes. So 2 minutes, identify a skill or a set of skills that you would like your judoka to improve. Okay, that can be anything you want. You're the coach, it's all on you. Okay, And then the session structure that I've just provided there of 2 minutes easy, 1 minute moderate, 1 minute hard. Think about what you would do in each of those little blocks. So the 2 minute block, what would I do to help develop that skill or set of skills? Okay, in the moderate section, what would I do in that block and in the hard hard block? Okay, so just take 2 minutes to have a think about it just now. Just to give a little bit of a hint, think back to the variables that we changed before, such as range of movement or speed of movement. Can I maybe put some of those into the boxes that would maybe, or into each of those blocks to change the intensity? Or can I do it purely through the constraint of what I'm allowing somebody to do? So, okay, I'm not going to let them transition to Newaza there, or I'm not going to let them do, you know, big major attacks there, and that might limit the intensity. So let's just take 2 minutes, go through and try and design a session, but then importantly, at some point you're going to try and run this session. Okay, so have a really good go at it, and then let's see how you get on. So we'll go for 2 minutes. If anyone's got questions in the meantime, feel free to fire them into the chat box.
Alan, there was one question earlier on. If we scroll up.
Yeah, go for it just now, and I'll go for it just now.
In this, do you include any mental concentration exercises, mental conditioning, or visualization drills?
That
was from Paul. So if Paul wants to jump on and elaborate on his question.
Yeah, go for it, Paul.
Oh, sure. Yeah, just wondering if there's any kind of component to help the athletes sort of like visualize their end goal when they don't yet have the physical skills, but they can see in video examples of what they want to aim for in like a technique, or, you know, just in a, you know, their just the way that they look when they perform a technique. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, like it sounds actually like you've almost answered it. Like a lot of the stuff you've said there is that I think sometimes there's a bit of like mystery around maybe the way that we get people to do these things, but it's all the things you've said there about, you know, imagine themselves going through it, watch themselves on video. All those things are useful tools. A tool I find really helpful, and it's we use it a lot in rugby. Is this concept of like a technical model or a subjective technical model, we would call it, which is being able to write down for the preparation phase of attack, so perhaps the breaking the balance, the accelerating in for the shape of the throw, and then the power delivery, and then finally the execution parts of the throw. Just being able to detail what that should look like, and also importantly, what it shouldn't look like. Because that way that you can start evaluating if my technique is looking like the way I want it to do, and I can also pick up on things that I don't want it to look like. And once I've written that out, it then becomes much easier to watch yourself back if you're watching your video and be able to almost like score yourself on your own subjective technical model of, right, I want my feet to be placed like this, and I don't want them to be placed like this. Okay, yeah, right, I'm getting better at that, and then so forth up the chain. So I think this, like, I think it's a really important thing. We do use it a lot in rugby. Is this like idea of being able to detail what it should look like and what it shouldn't look like at different stages of technical things, so that then you can start evaluating if your movement or if your techniques are progressing towards what you want it to look like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so cool.
There was one other question regarding the quick think exercise, Al. Beaton was asking if for the 1 minute portions that both athletes are working together. So doing like 1-for-1 technique in Newaza, 1-for-1 Ashiwaza, and then the Randori, or would you prescribe one person to be working, another person resting, or essentially being one person being Tori, one person being Uke, and then switching roles after the 3 minutes?
So that's a really good question, and fortunately, you can. There's loads of ways to be right with this stuff. So if you were obviously having only one person working, the other person is still working, but obviously not working at as high an intensity. So what you can do, and again, like we've done a lot of this before, is it's staggered. So one person's when you want their easy minute to be, that's when they're being the uki. So then they're easy minute. They're not doing as much. They're not having to be the aggressor, but they're still not getting a full rest. So their heart rate is still going to be elevated and they're going to be working for that time. So you definitely can do that, and you can stagger it so that, oh yeah, this person's, I want them to have a rest right now, or not a full rest, but I want them to have an easier block right now. So they're going to be the partner for this one, but I want somebody else to have a moderate or a hard minute. So therefore I'm gonna have them be the person working. So yeah, you can definitely do that. It's like all we're trying to do is get them to be working for a prolonged period of time, 30, 40 minutes, where they do not get a rest, because that's what's going to challenge the delivery system, which a lot of the time in judo we're just missing out on, because we're so focused on this really high intensity, going all out. We're missing some of these other adaptations. So yeah, if you want them to be partner and have their easy minute and them to be the partner, go for it. That'll work perfectly as well. Okay. So look, hopefully you've had a bit of a go at this. There's like a spectrum. There's a wide, like a barn door size spectrum of what's right in these situations. As long as you're getting about 30 minutes of work, there's little spices of different intensities in there. And you're thinking about the layer of session design where, I'm not just trying to get a physical change. I'm trying to get a skill adaptation. I'm trying to improve a skill. But now I can actually have bang for my buck, because I can get this skill while also developing this oxygen delivery system. Right now, I'm hitting two birds with one stone. Okay. Let's see. Okay, just to quickly sort of tie things up. Quite often people are a little bit confused as to what this looks like. This is just a general framework. Some people will train more than this. Some people will train less than this. But it just gives some sort of picture as to how we might piece together this whole idea of, well, I've got to be working on this and I've got to be working on this, and how am I going to piece it all together? So let's say you have your athletes 5 days a week, 5 mornings a week, or 5 evenings a week. Might be 4. That's not important. It's more just to get some sort of structure of what it might look like. We're going to have our judo elements. That's a given. That's what you guys, your bread and butter. So you'll have your judo elements there. Okay, how you structure them, that's totally up to you. You're the experts there. But where we can get the strength work in for the development athletes is this 10-minute physical window. Okay, so you might pick on the Monday or in the first section of the week to do the 5 rounds, 5 exercises, 10 repetitions on each. Okay. Then on the Tuesday, for the strength or for the fundamental movements, you'll be picking this for 10 minutes. You'll be doing 5 rounds, 5 exercises, but you might pick one of the other schemes, which would be the 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 repetitions. Okay. On the Wednesday, it might be an off day. If it's not an off day, you could pick one of the other schemes. On the Thursday, you're going to have your 10-minute physical window again. Again, you're going to have 5 exercises, 5 rounds, and you might do 5 repetitions on each, super slow. So you might do, a single leg jump and land. You might do a squat. You might do a lunge. You might do a hip hinge. You might do some push up with your hand on a medicine ball, and you might do a rope climb for your pulling. Okay. And then on the Friday, we're going to mix it up again. Still going to be 10 minutes. It's still going to be 5 exercises, but we're just going to change the repetition scheme. Okay, you could plug and play this, make a couple of tiny little move things around, and that would work really well. For the fitness side of things, if we look at really hard sessions, might be Tuesday, Friday. That's where you're going to put in your interval circuits that you'll do the whole time at the moment anyway, like in the video that I showed you. I just put down examples that I know are common that coaches like to do. But again, that side of it is up to you. You use your own critical thinking skills to design your own sessions based on what your athletes need. It would be the other sessions that I would suggest they are the days before your hard sessions where possible. So if you've got a day before your hard session, that's where you want to do this longer intensity aerobic type work. Okay. If you can't do that, don't sweat it. It's small stuff. They're developing athletes. It's not going to make or break them. But you want to be getting those in once or twice a week. And I've just put in there a rowing session, a running session. I would hope that through this presentation and what we've just chatted around, you're starting to think, oh, I can get that aerobic capacity into the randori session. Right, I'm going to get 30 minutes randori. How can I structure it to link in with the skill side that I want? Okay, but that just gives some sort of framework as to what it could look like. Okay, but there's a, as I said, it's a barn door width of variation, so don't worry about that. Okay, so just to sort of summarize on the fitness side of things, we've seen the Olympics. Duration of matches are well in excess of sort of 4, 5, 10, 11 minutes. So we need the aerobic capacity to be really high. And we don't get all of the adaptations just doing the crazy high intensity stuff. So we need to do some other type of training to hit those adaptations. Probably want to do it once or twice a week. Doesn't need to take up a huge amount of our training time. Positively, it's just easy and moderate effort work. There can be a little bit of high intensity, but for the most part, it's quite easy work, which is good because it's not then stressful for the athlete. And just because we're all talking about including this doesn't mean that you take out the other stuff. You keep that stuff in. That's what builds, the mental toughness, the being able to fight at a high intensity side of things. So that stuff's really important. Don't pick one or the other. Do them both in the same training week. And probably for the most part, you want to include that the whole year round. It doesn't need to be complicated with all sort of periodization stuff. It can just be, I'm going to keep this sort of stuff in the whole time. And if you do that, you really can't go far wrong. So look, that's enough of me talking about what I was going to deliver to you. So look, if you've got questions, let's fire them in the chat box. If it's about this stuff above, great. And if it's not, I'm happy to answer anything else.
We'll just wait a couple of minutes and see if there's any questions
Go.
pop up.
I'll stop sharing, but as I said, I'll give you the presentation, James, so that you've got it. So you've fundamental movement menu, so that you've got the schemes of how you design, or the sets and rep schemes, because that's really easy. You can just plug and play that stuff in. So I'll send all that so that you'll all have that.
Sure. Okay. So
Okay.
Johan has a question regarding age range.
Yeah, age ranges. So age range is this is a really evolving topic, and you have absolute specialists that are dealing with this sort of stuff the whole time. But something I find quite difficult because of that is that there's little tweaks to the information you get, and it's really difficult to apply as a coach. For the whole of this presentation, it has really been the development age range. So you're looking at just before people going through puberty, so probably like your 12 to 14-year-olds, all the way up to when people are just exiting puberty, because that's at the point where they're potentially going to start training and have access to perhaps a strength and conditioning coach, or they're going to move to a high performance facility. So this stuff really covers that sort of 12 to 18, 19, 20-year-old range. Okay, if they're getting up to the sort of 20-year-old range, you're going to have wanted to start doing heavier strength training there. But this is where it's difficult, because your judo coaches, you have 101 things you've got to do. And then trying to go down that line of delivering strength and conditioning becomes really challenging. So in my opinion, where possible, when they start getting that level, you probably need a strength and conditioning coach or support from, the Institute or Judo Canada or those sort of things.